The alert tone cuts through the silence like a blade. Idris jerks awake with her hand already on the spanner she sleeps next to. The sound is wrong. It is not the oxygen scrubber warning. It is not the cracked coolant line she has been meaning to patch. It is the long-range comms array, and she has not heard that tone in 6 months. She is moving before her eyes fully focus. The corridor is dark except for the emergency strip, a pale orange glow that makes every shadow look like a body. She steps over a panel Torben pried loose yesterday and never replaced. The deck plates are cold through her socks. The comms station is a nest of salvaged cables and jury-rigged displays. Idris drops into the seat and pulls up the log. The signal is artificial, structured, repeating. It is not Vareth encryption. She knows that digital signature too well now. It is something older, something she has never seen before. She runs the pattern through the station's limited translation library. The system churns for 40 seconds, then it spits out a match. ARI diplomatic encryption protocols. Emergency frequency Alpha 7, human emergency frequency. The frequency should not exist anymore. The ARI should have no reason to broadcast on a channel that belonged to a dead species. Idris stares at the screen until the numbers blur. Then she climbs through the repair shaft toward the observation blister. The blister is a bubble of reinforced glass overlooking the belt debris. Idris presses her palm flat against the cold surface and watches the stars drift past. The signal is a question she did not ask for. It is a door she did not open. She hears Torben before she sees him. His knees crack in the quiet. He appears at the base of the ladder with a cup of recycled coffee in his hand. The smell reaches her before he does, burnt grain and old metal. He does not ask what she found. He reads the numbers over her shoulder and says nothing for a long minute. Then he takes a sip of his coffee and waits. It is an ARI diplomatic emissary, broadcasting on a frequency that should have been decommissioned when Earth burned. They must have found wreckage, a data core, a black box, something that still carried the old protocols. Torben sets the cup down on the nearest flat surface. His hands are inside his insulated gloves, but she can see the shape of his knuckles through the fabric. He knows what she is thinking. She makes the decision before she finishes the thought. Not a distress call, a data burst, a copy of everything the station has recorded since the attack. Sensor logs, visual captures, ship identifications, flight paths, the names of every Vareth vessel that crossed into this system with weapons hot. Torben shakes his head once. Slow, final. The ARI might trade the information to the Vareth for diplomatic favor. The ARI might already be in negotiations with the Empire. The data burst could be a signed confession on a platter. Idris counters with the one thing she knows about the ARI. They are record keepers, archivists. They have preserved the histories of 7 extinct species. They do not do it for political advantage. They do it because they believe truth has weight. She does not know if that belief is strong enough to withstand Vareth pressure, but she has nothing else to bet on. She sends the burst. She attaches one line of text. No greeting, no plea. Just a statement that sits on the transmission screen like a stone dropped into still water. This is a record of species-wide murder. Preserve it. She hits send. The dish motors hum through the deck plates. The sound vibrates up through her boots, through her spine, through her teeth. It is a low, steady sound. Then it stops. Silence. Idris looks at the child. The girl is 12 years old. Her parents were on Mars when the bombardment started. She is eating a cold ration bar with the mechanical concentration of someone who has learned not to taste her food. She does not look up. Idris realizes something she has been avoiding for 6 months. She is not trying to save anyone on this station. The station is dead. They are all dead. She is trying to make sure that when the Vareth finish their work, someone outside this system knows what humanity was. The grief she has been carrying shifts. It does not get lighter, it changes shape. It becomes a fuel. 3 days pass. Idris checks the comms station every hour. The ARI do not reply. The signal fades into the background radiation of the belt. She starts to wonder if it was a ghost, a transmission from a wreck that drifted into a gravity well and crumbled. She starts to wonder if she imagined the whole thing. On the 3rd day, the comms array chirps again. Idris opens the message, with her heart beating against her ribs like something trying to escape. The encryption is not ARI. It is Vareth military protocol. Someone in the ARI delegation forwarded her data burst. The Vareth now know exactly where to look. Idris stares at the screen. The message is short, 2 lines of translated text. She reads them 3 times before the meaning settles into her bones like cold water. The first line is a location confirmation. The second line is a transit time estimate. The Vareth fleet will arrive in 63 hours. The living metal of the silent scale thrummed against Threx's boot soles. A low, constant vibration, like a drum played underwater. He stood at the center of the bridge, his 3 eyes fixed on the central holotank where the data from the ARI transmission had been reconstructed. He had read it 4 times now. The signal strength was impressive for a pre-jump civilization. The humans had routed their data burst through 3 separate relay frequencies, each one shifting before a countersignal could lock onto it. The technical architecture was not elegant. It was a patchwork of salvage and brute force, but it was functional. More than functional, it was clean. Malker shifted beside him, the copper scales on his jaw darkening with agitation. "Commander, we have a confirmed origin point. The refinery is not mobile. We launch kinetics, we saturate the debris field, we are done in 3 hours." Threx did not turn. The transmission was clean. Clean? It means they have a functional power grid, a computer network. They are not a broken ship waiting to die. They are a nest with infrastructure. Malker's tapping grew louder against his own jaw. "Then we send a ground party, burn the core from the inside. The living metal on the hull can adapt to the debris field." Threx lifted one hand, silencing the younger Vareth without looking at him. He spoke to the navigation specialist whose species he had never bothered to learn. "Deploy reconnaissance drones. Full-spectrum passive scanning only. I want hull composition, heat signature distribution, and a ballistic analysis of the debris density within 3 standard hours." The specialist nodded and turned to her console. Malker stepped closer, his voice dropping to a frequency that carried threat. "We waste time. We waste munitions if I send a strike package into a structure I have not seen." Threx finally turned, meeting Malker's center eye with his own. "The refinery has been operational for decades. The humans have had months to fortify it. I will not spend my ammunition on guesswork." The bridge fell silent except for the living metal's low pulse. The drones returned 2 hours later. Threx reviewed the data in the holotank, his hands clasped behind his back. The refinery had no shield generators, no missile launchers visible on any external hull scan. A single railgun array sat on the station's dorsal ring, its power signature barely above idle. But the debris field. The density was exceptional. A ring of shattered metal, pulverized rock, and twisted superstructure surrounded the refinery at a radius of roughly 500 kilometers. Most of it was moving at velocities that would shred an unprotected ship hull. A suicide run would cost him 3, maybe 4 vessels before they reached firing range. Malker spoke what Threx was already thinking. They are hiding behind their own dead. Threx watched the debris field rotate in the holotank. The humans had not built this defense. They had simply stayed inside the wreckage of their own expansion. The shattered remains of their mining operations, their failed colony launches, their industrial accidents, all of it now formed a wall of wreckage between him and his objective. They are using the corpses of their industry as cover. Malker's scales had deepened to a patina of frustration. "Then we starve them, tighten the encirclement, cut their solar collection." Threx considered the proposal. It was tactically sound. The refinery's power signature was weak. Without the ability to harvest radiation from the distant star, their fusion core would burn through its fuel reserves within weeks. The humans would either freeze or suffocate. No expenditure of ammunition, no loss of ships. He gave the order. The fleet began to move. The silent scale shifted its position, the living metal on its hull rippling as it adjusted to the new formation. Threx's mouth filled with the familiar copper sulfate taste, bitter, metallic, the chemical signature of frustration his body could not suppress. He did not understand why he felt it. The decision was correct. The siege was efficient. He brought up one final frame from the drone footage, a magnification of the refinery's main hull. The image was grainy, captured through a gap in the debris field that had lasted only fractions of a second. There was a symbol painted on the hull. It was crude, hand-done, a bright blue circle with a smaller red circle inside it. The paint had been applied thickly, unevenly, as if the person holding the brush had been in a hurry or working without proper gravity. Threx stared at the symbol. He did not know what it meant, but he recognized the impulse. His own people painted clan markings on their ship hulls before battle. Small patterns, precise, denoting lineage and territory. The blue circle on the refinery was not a clan marking. It was something else. A claim, a boundary, a statement that this place belonged to someone. The humans were not dying. They were living in their home. Malker's voice cut through his thoughts. We are in position. The encirclement is complete. Threx nodded. Hold the line. No ships approach the debris field, no transmissions. We wait. The bridge settled into silence. The holotank showed the fleet's formation, a tightening ring around the asteroid, the refinery a small speck at its center. Time passed. The red light from the distant star cast long shadows across the deck. Then the railgun array fired. The alert was immediate. A single round launched from the dorsal ring, moving at a trajectory that did not intersect with any Vareth vessel. Threx tracked its path in the holotank. The shot was not aimed at his fleet. It was aimed at the Ari vessel, still drifting at the edge of sensor range. The round missed. It was not meant to hit. Malker stared at the trajectory data. What was that? Threx watched the round vanish into the void. The humans were not trying to kill. They were trying to send a message. He did not know what the message said, but the symbol on the hull burned in his memory, and the copper sulfate taste in his mouth would not fade. The cold had settled into Torben's bones 3 weeks ago, and showed no sign of leaving. He worked by headlamp in the recycler bay, his breath curling white with every exhale. The filter medium was a problem. The original polymer mesh had degraded to the point where it passed more contaminants than it caught. He had replaced it twice already. This time he was using crushed asteroid rock packed between layers of insulation foam, 40% efficiency, better than nothing. The water would taste like minerals and regret, but it would not kill them. The station's metal frame contracted in the dark. A sharp ping echoed from somewhere aft, then another. The sound was like something tapping on the hull, asking to come in. Torben ignored it. His gloves were off. The arthritic joints in his hands screamed at him in the cold, but he could not feel the fine grain of the crushed rock through insulated fingers. He packed the medium into the filter housing with the careful patience of a man who had learned that rushing repairs meant repeating them. The recycler door hissed open behind him. He did not turn. Idris stepped into the bay, a ration bar and a cup of hot water in her hands. The steam rose thin and quickly scattered in the dry air. She set them on the workbench beside his elbow. Power situation is worse, she said. The collectors are losing efficiency. Torben kept packing the filter. Shadows. Yes, Idris sat on an overturned crate, the tablet in her lap flickering with a low battery warning. The Vareth ships are positioning themselves to minimize our exposure windows. They are learning our rotation. They adjust every 12 hours. He asked the question without looking up. How long? She paused. He knew that pause. It was the pause of someone recalculating hope and finding it wanting. 2 months, she said. Maybe 3, if we cannibalize the station's structural supports for reactor fuel. Torben stopped moving. The structural supports were not decorative. They were the bones of the refinery. Removing them meant sections of the station would become unsupported. It meant the frame would flex. It meant they might die to a hull breach before the cold finished them. He resumed packing the filter. How many supports? I have not calculated that yet. Calculate it. Idris nodded and looked back at her tablet. The silence stretched long and thin. The child appeared in the doorway. She was wrapped in a thermal blanket that dragged on the deck plates behind her, a small dark-haired girl with wide eyes that had not stopped being afraid in 3 weeks. Kala, 10 years old. She carried the same book she had been reading for 5 days, a battered paperback with a torn spine that Torben had found in a storage locker. The only printed text left on the station. She did not look at him or Idris. She sat down against the wall, pulled the blanket tighter, and opened the book. Torben worked. The recycler cycled 3 times before he pronounced it functional, 40% efficiency. He washed his hands in the thin trickle of water from the outlet, dried them on his pants, and picked up the ration bar. It was hard and flavorless. He ate it anyway. Kala was still watching him. Do the aliens have children? She asked. The question landed like a physical weight. Torben felt it settle in his chest and sit there. He turned to look at her. Her face was serious, not curious. She was not asking about biology. She was asking about the shape of the thing that wanted them dead. I do not know, he said. It was the truth. He had never considered it. The Vareth ships hung in the dark like machines, like extensions of a will that had no need for nurseries or bedtime stories. He had not imagined them producing anything except orders and fire. Calla nodded as if she had expected that answer and looked back at her book. Idris stiffened. The tablet in her hand chirped once, then twice. Transmission, she said. ARI encryption. She read the data burst in silence. Torben watched her face. It gave him nothing. Then she looked up, and there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Not hope exactly. Something narrower, something with teeth. They sent a gravity map, she said. Vareth patrol routes in the belt. Torben crossed to her and looked at the screen. The map was rendered in simple lines, the gravity wells of asteroids and planetoids marked in blue. The Vareth ships were red dots, and there in the upper quadrant was a gap. 6 hours, maybe 7. A window where the blockade was thin enough for a small vessel to slip through. Torben looked at Idris. Do you trust it? She stared at the map. I do not know. The silence returned. The station groaned around them. The alternative, she said, is 2 months of slow freezing followed by death. She started calculating burn trajectories. Her fingers moved across the tablet with the economy of someone who had already made the decision in her head. Torben left her to it. He walked through the dark corridors, his headlamp cutting a narrow cone of light across the metal walls. The cold pressed against him. The recycled air smelled sour, thin, unwashed. They had run out of clean clothes 2 weeks ago. Everyone smelled the same. It did not matter. He reached the observation blister and stopped. The stars were clear through the armored glass, unforgiving and beautiful, and there, scattered across the black, the Vareth ships hung in their patient formation. They did not blink. They did not move. They simply waited for the humans to die. Torben allowed himself 1 minute of hatred. He counted it in his head. 60 seconds of pure, cold, useless rage directed at the distant dots that held his species in a cage. When the minute ended, he let it go. He turned away from the glass and walked back to the common area. Calla had taped something to the wall. It was a piece of paper torn from a notebook. On it in crayon she had drawn the solar system, 9 planets, a yellow sun, tiny labeled orbits, the letters cramped and careful. Jupiter was a red and white striped circle. Saturn had a ring. Earth was blue and green. Torben stopped. He stood in the cold corridor, staring at the drawing. The tape was already curling at the edges. The paper was thin enough to see the metal behind it. Every child who could have drawn this picture was dead. Every school, every classroom, every art project pinned to every refrigerator on every world humanity had built. Gone. Except for this one. Torben was not keeping a station alive. He was keeping a species alive. The scale of it hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly. He braced a hand against the wall and stood there, breathing until the shaking passed. Then he went back to work. Idris met him in the corridor outside the courier bay. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond him. The window is real, she said. I checked the numbers 3 times. Torben nodded. But the courier's fusion drive has not been started in 6 years, she continued. It was never designed for sustained operation. It was a system shuttle, not a deep space vessel. So we tested. Idris looked at him. If the drive fails, we lose the only ship we have. If we stay here, we lose the only child we have. She nodded slowly. She pressed the start sequence. The grinding noise echoed through the station like a scream. Not the clean hum of an ignition cycle. A scrape, a shudder, something metal catching on something it should not be touching. Torben closed his eyes. The drive was damaged. They had no spare parts. The only tool that could fix it was on the outside of the hull, in vacuum, bolted to the maintenance track that ran the length of the refinery. Exposed to Vareth sniper drones. He opened his eyes. Get me a suit. The hull bit through her gloved fingers as she pulled herself forward. No sound. Only the vibration of the metal and the rhythm of her own breath inside the helmet. The sun threw her shadow across the pitted surface like a knife cut, sharp-edged and absolute. Idris moved hand over hand along the tether. The cable looked frayed near the connection point. She had checked it before exiting. She had checked it twice. She still did not trust it. The suit radio gave her nothing but static. The Vareth were jamming everything. She was alone out here with no way to call for help and no one who would hear her if she screamed. The drive housing sat ahead of her. A blackened scar ran along its casing where the internal arc had vented plasma through the seam. She had seen it from the observation blister 3 days ago. She had known immediately what it meant. She reached the housing and clamped her boots to the magnetic anchor points. The kit was strapped to her thigh. She unsealed it with fingers that felt like blocks of wood inside the insulated gloves. The cracked coil sat in the center of the housing. It was black along one edge. The arc had carbonized the ceramic coating. She had one replacement in the kit. If she dropped it, there was no backup. She worked the fasteners loose. The tool in her hand transmitted every turn through the glove as a dull vibration. No sound, no confirmation except the feel of it moving. She pulled the damaged coil free and set it on the hull beside her. It drifted slightly before the magnetic clamp caught it. The replacement slid into the housing with a resistance that told her it fit. She seated it fully and began tightening the fasteners, three-fingered grip, gloves too thick for precision work. She did it anyway because there was no other option. On the bridge of the silent scale, Threx watched the drone feed. The human moved across the station's surface with no wasted motion. She did not look around. She did not pause to check her surroundings. She worked like a creature that had done this 1,000 times and expected to do it 1,000 more. Malker stood at his station, his jaw tapping rhythm under his fingers. "Commander, we have a clear shot. One round and that figure is gone." Threx did not answer. "Commander," Malker's voice carried the edge of impatience. "This is an operational target in exposed space. There is no tactical reason to delay." Threx watched the human pull something from the housing. A component, darkened, broken. She set it aside and inserted another. "We have one reason," Threx said. Malker waited. "I want to see what she does." The human tightened the final fastener and checked her work. She pressed something on the housing and waited. Then she pressed it again. Threx leaned forward in his command chair. She was looking at the housing, not at the drone, not at the Vareth fleet that surrounded her station. She looked at the machine. The housing lit, a soft glow through a viewing port Threx had not noticed before. The human touched the housing once more, a gesture that looked almost like reassurance. Then she turned to go. Idris was about to signal Torben when something caught her eye. A small node attached to the hull near her position. It was barely larger than her palm. It matched the color of the station metal well enough that she might have missed it if the angle of the sunlight had not thrown its profile into relief. Vareth design. She recognized the shape from the sensor logs the Ari had shared. It was a passive listening node. It fed audio and vibration data through a tight beam relay that could not be jammed because the signal was buried in the background radiation of the belt. They had been listening to everything. Every conversation in the mess hall, every argument about the ration allotment, every calculation of burn trajectories, the child asking about their children. Everything. Idris stared at the node. Her breath fogged the inside of her visor. She could feel the suit recycling the same air she had already breathed 100 times. She had a choice. She could remove the node. The Vareth would know she found it. They would know she knew. She could leave it. They would keep listening. She reached into her kit, not for a tool, for a power relay that connected a nearby solar panel to the station's secondary grid. A relay she had replaced 3 months ago because the old one had developed a fault. She pulled the relay free and examined it. Then she looked at the node again. She did not remove the node. She attached the relay to the power line that fed the node. She adjusted the flow until the relay began to oscillate, a feedback pulse, random noise that would bleed into the node's recording system. It would corrupt every piece of data the node had collected. Audio files would degrade. Vibration signatures would become unrecognizable. The Vareth would have a record that looked like static. They would still listen. They would hear everything from this moment forward, but they would not be able to prove anything they had heard before. Idris sealed her kit and began the crawl back toward the airlock. She did not look at the drone. She did not look at the node. She looked at the tether. She looked at her hands. She looked at the airlock door. She did not acknowledge the Vareth presence at all. Threx watched the human disappear into the airlock. The door sealed behind her. The station's surface was empty again, scarred by her footprints, marked by her tools. She never looked at the drone. Not once. She knew it was there. She had to know. The node she had found was Vareth technology. She must have understood that the drone was watching, and she had not looked at it. She had not looked at him. Malker spoke from his station. She found the node. She will know we have been monitoring internal communications. Threx did not answer. Commander, if she knows, the tactical advantage is compromised. We should strike now before she can transmit that information to any other survivors. Threx watched the empty hull. The footprints were still visible in the dust. They led from the airlock to the drive housing and back. She treated me as irrelevant, he said. Malker paused, Commander. She did not look at us. She did not acknowledge our presence. She completed her task and returned inside. She did not consider us worth the time it would take to turn her head. Threx sat back in his command chair. The metal creaked under his weight. I have commanded fleets for 40 cycles, he said. I have subjugated 7 species. I have personally authorized the extinction of 3. And this human in a vacuum suit held together with hope did not find me worth a glance. Malker said nothing. Threx stared at the feed. The hull was silent, still. The footprints were already beginning to fade as the station's rotation carried them into shadow. He did not order the strike. Idris cycled through the airlock and pulled her helmet off. The air inside the station was cold and thin and smelled like recycled plastic and old sweat. She breathed it anyway. Torben was waiting at the inner door. His gloves were off. His hands were visible. The arthritis had swollen his knuckles to knots. She was in the conduits, he said. Did you do it? She nodded. The drive is running. The courier ship will burn. Torben exhaled, then his eyes narrowed. What else happened? She could tell him. She could explain about the node. She could let him carry the weight of knowing that the Vareth had heard their conversations for weeks. She did not. The replacement took, she said. The drive test should be clean. Torben studied her face. He did not believe her. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened. But he did not push. The courier ship is ready, she said. The escape window opens in 12 hours. Torben nodded slowly, then we pack. They walked together through the cold corridor. The station hummed around them. The drive was running. The ship could fly. Idris did not tell him about the node. She did not know if the Vareth knew about the escape plan. She did not know if they were waiting for her to launch so they could shoot the courier ship down in open space. She did not know if she was leading the last 12 survivors of the human species into a killing field. She decided to go anyway. The command chamber of the silent scale sat in a dim, red-tinted silence. The sleep cycle had passed 3 hours ago, but Threx Talak remained standing at the primary display, his 3 eyes fixed on the drone feed. The station hung against the darkness like a broken tooth, its surface pitted and scarred, its single rotating section turning with a slowness that looked exhausted. He had not slept in 52 hours. The living metal hull breathed around him, a slow pulse that moved through the deck plates and up into his feet. He had heard that pulse every day for 40 cycles. He had never listened to it until now. It sounded like something holding on. His personal log was open on the secondary display. He had been keeping records since his first command, a habit born from a mentor's advice about the value of reflection. He scrolled back through the entries from the past weeks and stopped at the first page. The words looked foreign to him now. Day 14 of siege. Target station shows no offensive capability. Power levels declining at expected rate. Estimated time to collapse, 47 cycles. He scrolled forward. Day 22. The engineer replaced a filtration unit today. He moved slowly as though his hands caused him pain. He hummed while he worked. The melody was unfamiliar. I have asked the logician to search for cultural matches. He remembered writing that. He remembered watching the feed and noting the way the old human's shoulders curved forward, the way he paused to flex his fingers inside the insulated gloves. He had recorded those details because they seemed relevant to assessing the target's physical condition. He scrolled again. Day 31. The female completed an EVA repair at 0.43 local gravity. She carried no obvious weapon. Her fingers moved with precision, even through the suit gloves. She worked without communication for 46 minutes. Threx closed the log. The environmental system hissed somewhere behind him, a sound he had heard every day for 40 cycles and never noticed. He noticed it now because the chamber was so quiet that every noise was an intrusion. The bridge crew had been sent to rotational rest. Malker was off duty. Threx was alone with the drone feed and the log and the question forming in his chest like a knot he could not loosen. The door opened. Malker entered without announcement. He crossed the chamber in 3 strides and lowered himself into the adjacent command chair. He did not speak immediately. He sat with his hands resting on his knees, his scaled fingers tapping a slow rhythm against his own thigh. Threx did not turn. "You are supposed to be resting." "I was alerted that the commander has not rested in 52 hours. Malker's voice was careful, measured, stripped of its usual impatience. "Concern is being discussed among the crew. Let that stand. Let the words carry the weight they carried. They wonder if you have developed empathy for the extermination targets." Threx turned. He faced Malker fully, letting the young subcommander see his 3 eyes without the filter of a display between them. He asked a question that had been pressing against his throat for 3 days. What is the military purpose of destroying a child who cannot reach a weapon? Malker did not flinch. He had been ready for this question. He had rehearsed the answer. The child will grow into a soldier who can. The child carries the cultural memory of the defeat. The child is a seed. Threx looked back at the drone feed. The station rotated in silence. Somewhere inside it, the child was wrapped in a thermal blanket, clutching a book that should not have survived the fire. "Seeds need soil," Threx said. "There is no soil here. There is only rock and radiation. The child is not a threat. She is a witness." Malker rose from the chair. His jaw tapped once, twice, the nervous habit he could not suppress. He saluted with the flat of his hand pressed against his chest. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Commander, I have reported my concerns to the Council. A review board will be convened when the fleet returns." The door closed behind him. Threx stood alone in the red light. The living metal breathed around him. The environmental system hissed. The drone feed showed the station, small and still, a speck of light in an ocean of dark. He opened the ARI data packet. He had reviewed its contents a dozen times since it arrived. The sensor logs were thorough, the evidence damning, but he had not read the attached text since the first day. He had not let himself. He read it now. "This is a record of species-wide murder. Preserve it." He read it again. The human had not sent the data to ask for rescue. She had not expected anyone to come. She had sent it to make sure someone remembered. She had thrown her last message into the dark, knowing it would probably never reach anyone who cared, and she had done it anyway. 7 species had died under Vareth expansion. 7 species had been removed from the galaxy, their histories folded into the Empire's archive, their names reduced to footnotes in logistics reports. None of them had sent a record. None of them had tried to be remembered. Only these humans, these fragile, stubborn creatures made of water and chemistry, who painted circles on their hulls and hummed while they worked and sent their last words into the void without knowing if anyone was listening. Threx closed the data packet. He opened the fleet network. His hands moved across the interface with the economy of someone who had performed this action 10,000 times. He accessed the patrol log. He located the escape window, the 6-hour gap in the blockade that the human female had found. He opened the sensor record for that period. He altered it. The falsified log showed no vessel launching from the refinery during the escape window. It showed the station remaining stationary, its power levels declining, its systems failing at the expected rate. It showed nothing unusual. It showed exactly what a routine siege report should show. He uploaded the false record to the fleet network. The deletion of the original took less than a second. He sat back in the darkness. The living metal breathed around him. He did not know if the deception would survive the Council's review. He did not know if Malker's report would trigger an investigation before the fleet returned. He did not know if he would stand before a tribunal in 40 cycles, charged with dereliction, his record broken, his retirement revoked. He did not know any of this. He did it anyway. The courier ship's cockpit was never designed for long flight. The seats were hard, the controls labeled in a language only Torben fully remembered, and the air smelled like stale oil and old wiring. Idris ran the pre-flight checklist with her thumb, tracing each line on the cracked display. 3 of the 6 systems showed amber warning lights. She ignored them and started the ignition sequence. The deck plates vibrated beneath her boots. A low thrum built through the hull as the fusion core spun up, and she felt it in her molars. Torben sat in the co-pilot's seat, both hands pressed flat against the engine temperature readouts as if he could feel the numbers through the glass. "Thermal exchange is marginal," he said. "Marginal is fine. It is not fine past 3.5 hours. She did not answer. The launch window would close in 90 seconds. If they missed it, the Vareth patrol rotation would reset, and their gap in coverage would vanish for another 18 days. The station could not survive 18 more days. She cut the safety locks on the docking clamps and felt the ship drift free from the refinery hull. It was not a graceful separation. The courier had been bolted to the station for so long that the docking collar groaned as it released. Idris fired the maneuvering thrusters and pulled them clear of the debris field. A chip of frozen rock skittered across the viewport and was gone. She increased thrust to 1.5 Gs. The acceleration pressed her back into the seat and pulled the blood from her face. In the cargo hold behind her, she heard a sharp gasp from one of the survivors, then silence. The courier's cabin was never built for passengers. The acceleration couches in the hold had been designed for cargo containers, not people, but they would hold. Torben watched the passive sensors with the stillness of a man waiting for an explosion. The Vareth fleet showed on the display as a cluster of hard points. Idris watched them too. No ships moved to intercept. No weapons locks appeared on the threat indicator. The blockade held its position as if she did not exist. She kept the burn steady. The asteroid where they had hidden was already receding, a lump of dark rock tumbling through the belt. The refinery was a smear of reflected light on the edge of the display. She did not look back at it. Torben cycled the sensors 3 times. Each pass showed the same picture. The Vareth ships remained on their patrol routes, blinking through their predictable orbits like beads on a string. Nothing changed course. Nothing accelerated toward them. "This is wrong," he said. "Probably. They should have seen us." "They did see us." Idris tapped the display. 40 minutes ago when we broke the docking seal, their sensors picked up the thermal signature. They know we launched." Torben's hands tightened on the armrests. "Then why are they letting us go?" She did not have an answer for that. She did not have the luxury of doubt. The gap in their patrol window was real, and she was going to use every second of it. She kept the ship on its trajectory and watched the numbers climb. After 4 hours, the refinery was no longer visible. The Vareth fleet had become a cluster of distant lights, indistinguishable from the ordinary stars. The courier was alone in open space, and no one was shooting at them. Idris let out a breath she had been holding since the launch sequence began. She set a course for the nearest system with a non-Vareth presence, the Ari homeworld, 4 months away at the courier's maximum velocity, 4 months of continuous burn with no possibility of stopping. She did not know if the Ari would welcome them or turn them away. She did not know if the Ari even knew the Vareth had erased Earth. She only knew that the Ari were not Vareth, and that was the closest thing to safety she could name. She allowed herself a single moment of relief. Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, her jaw unclenched. Then she checked the fuel levels and recalculated. The numbers were bad. The numbers were worse than bad. The numbers were a quiet catastrophe that had been waiting for her since the moment she realized they had enough reaction mass to launch. They did not have enough to land. 3 weeks short of the Ari homeworld, the fuel would run dry. They would coast the rest of the way on momentum, cold and silent and unable to decelerate. They would drift past their destination at a velocity that made any rescue impossible. She stared at the numbers until her eyes burned. Then she closed the calculation and did not mention it. The cockpit door opened. A small figure stood in the doorway, gripping the frame with both hands against the ship's gentle acceleration. Kala. The child wore a thermal blanket wrapped around her like a cape. Her face was pale from the G's, but her eyes were wide and alert. "Are we safe now?" she asked. Idris looked at her. The child's face held hope, real hope, the kind that could not afford to be broken because it was the only thing keeping her upright. The fuel calculation sat in Idris's mind like a weight in the gut. She told the truth. "We are not safe." Kala's expression did not change. She waited for more. "But we are not dead yet," Idris said. The child nodded. She nodded as if this was a reasonable answer, as if being not dead was enough to work with. She crawled into the space between the 2 seats and sat on the deck, wrapping her blanket tighter. Torben looked at Idris over the child's head. He said nothing. He did not have to. Idris understood then that survival was not about reaching safety. It was about refusing to stop moving. The fuel would run out. The courier would run cold. But they would be moving until the last possible second, and moving meant they were still alive, and still alive meant the story was not over. She checked the sensors one more time. The Vareth fleet was a distant memory. The belt was behind them. The stars ahead were unchanging and cold. The sensors pinged. A new contact appeared on the edge of the display, not behind them, ahead. A single Vareth patrol ship on an intercept course from a different vector, as if it had been waiting at a specific coordinate. Idris's hand moved to the emergency shutdown before her brain caught up with her eyes. The ship did not fire. It did not target them. It pulsed a single navigation light. A signal, Vareth military protocol for a message drop. The transmission arrived in a tight beam packet. Idris let it buffer for 30 seconds, checking for malware or tracking code. The packet was clean. She opened it. A set of coordinates, a precise location in the asteroid belt, a fuel cache. The message was signed with a symbol she did not recognize. It was not a Vareth military marker. It was not a civilian designation. It was something else, something written in a hand that did not belong to standard protocol. She looked at Torben. "Someone among the Vareth is helping us," she said. The patrol ship changed course and vanished into the dark. The coordinates sat on her display, undeniable and impossible. A fuel cache that would let them reach the Ari homeworld. A gift from an enemy she could not name. She did not know why. She did not know who. She only knew that the fuel calculation had changed, and that meant they had a chance. She set the new course and increased the thrust. The ship carried them forward. The child pressed her face against the viewport and watched the stars crawl past. The engine hummed. The fuel in the tanks was not enough, but somewhere ahead, waiting in the dark, there was more. The shuttle dropped through the cloud band, and the world turned green. Idris pressed her forehead to the viewport. The glass was cold. The air inside the cabin smelled like damp earth and growing things, a smell she had almost forgotten existed. A smell that meant life could happen without filtration systems and radiation scrubbers and constant vigilance against the void. Torben sat across from her with his hands folded in his lap. His hair had gone white in the past 4 months. The skin around his eyes had tightened into a permanent squint, as if he was still looking through a helmet visor at empty space. He had not spoken much since the fuel warning had appeared on the courier's display, 3 weeks short. They had coasted the last quarter of the journey on nothing but momentum and prayer, decelerating on fumes, bleeding velocity into the Ari system's outer gravity well, until the planet had reached up and caught them. Kala sat between them. She was taller now. Her face had lost the soft roundness of childhood and gained something sharper underneath. The sealed pouch containing her parents' photograph hung from a cord around her neck, and her hand rested on it the way other children held toys. The shuttle's engines shifted pitch. The descent flattened. Through the viewport, Idris saw a city rising from the green, not a city of towers and straight lines, but something woven into the landscape, grown from the earth itself. Curved structures the color of pale wood rose between massive trees whose canopies formed living roofs. Bridges of braided vine connected platforms where figures moved. The Ari homeworld was not a monument to technology. It was a garden that had learned to build. The landing platform was made of the same pale wood, polished to a smooth finish by generations of use. When the hatch opened, the air hit Idris like a physical force. Warm, moist, alive. It carried the smell of soil and leaf decay and flowers she had no names for. She stood at the top of the ramp and did not move for a long moment. Her lungs ached with the effort of breathing air that had not been processed by machines. Behind her, Torben let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. It was hard to tell. Ari attendants waited at the base of the ramp. They moved on 2 legs, but their posture was avian, heads tilting with quick, precise motions, feathers shifting across their shoulders in subtle color changes that Idris had learned to read as emotional signals over the past month of orbital communication. The senior attendant's feathers were a steady pale blue, calm, welcoming, but neutral. "Ambassador Verath," the attendant said. Her voice had a soft trill at the end of words, a musical quality that the translator module in Idris's ear rendered as clear standard. "The council is assembled. They are ready to hear you." Idris nodded. She stepped off the ramp and felt soil give slightly under her boots. Real soil, living soil. She reached back and took Kala's hand. Kala squeezed once hard and did not let go. The council chamber was not a room. It was a clearing. Massive trees ringed the space, their trunks wide enough that Torben could not have wrapped his arms around them. Their branches met overhead, filtering the sunlight into a constant green-gold twilight. Perches of varying heights formed a semicircle around a central platform where the human delegation stood. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of moss and still water. The ARI ambassadors watched from their perches. There were 12 of them. Their feathers ranged from deep indigo to bright copper, and their eyes, large, dark, ringed with iridescent markings, tracked every movement the humans made. Idris placed the data core on the central platform. It was a small cylinder worn smooth from months of handling, containing everything she had saved. The sensor logs, the attack records, the casualty lists, the names of every colony she had been able to confirm. She had spent the 4 months in transit compiling and cross-referencing, checking and rechecking. The Vareth had killed at least 40 million humans, probably more. The true number would never be known. She stepped back and let the ARI examine the data. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The ambassadors did not move from their perches. They did not speak. Their feathers shifted slowly as they processed the information through their own neural interfaces, reading the records, cross-referencing against known Vareth military protocols, calculating trajectories and yields and body counts. Idris stood still. Her hands trembled. The tremor had started in the 3rd month of the voyage and had not stopped. She did not try to hide it. Torben stood to her left, his arthritic fingers locked together behind his back. Kala stood to her right, the sealed pouch pressed against her chest. The senior ambassador moved. She was the one with silver-tipped feathers, a female in her late breeding cycles, her eyes carrying the weight of decades. She descended from her perch and walked to the central platform on legs that moved with deliberate grace. When she stopped in front of Idris, she was close enough that Idris could see the individual barbs of her feathers, the way they caught the green light and scattered it. The ambassador spoke. Her voice was low, carrying the trill that marked her words as ceremonial. "What do you want?" Idris had rehearsed this answer 1,000 times. She had said it to herself in the dark of the courier's cabin, lying awake while the life support hummed and Kala breathed in the bunk below. She had said it while Torben slept and the void pressed against the hull. She had said it until the words felt worn smooth, like stones in a river. She said it now. "We want to exist. We want the galaxy to know what the Vareth did. We want our dead to be remembered." The ambassador's feathers rippled. The color deepened at the tips. A sign of respect, according to the ARI cultural briefings Idris had studied. A sign that the words had landed. "We have reviewed your evidence," the ambassador said. "The Vareth fleet movements match your logs. The weapon signatures are consistent with their standard arsenal. The scale of destruction is beyond what we had believed them capable of." She paused. "You are the only survivors we have found, the only confirmation that humans still exist." Idris felt the words like a blow to the chest. She had known. She had known since the moment she had seen Earth's last known position on a gravity map, a scattering of debris with no hope of recovery. But hearing it spoken aloud in this green-lit clearing with witnesses, it made it real in a way that the empty years in the belt had not. "I know," she said. Her voice did not break. She had practiced that too. "Your request for representation will be granted," the ambassador said. "The ARI Council will sponsor your voice in the Galactic Assembly. You will have a podium. You will have the right to speak." She paused again. "But you must understand the limits of what we can offer. The Vareth Empire is too powerful to confront directly. They outnumber the combined fleets of every council species. Their territory spans 53 habitable systems. We cannot fight them. We cannot even sanction them without risking war that would consume this sector for generations." Idris had known this too. She had known it the moment she had decided to send the data burst instead of a distress call. There would be no cavalry. There would be no vengeance. There would be only the story. "We accept," she said. The ambassador's head tilted, a sign of curiosity. "You accept very quickly." "I've had 4 months to think about it," Idris said. "Survival first, everything else later." The ambassador made a sound that the translator rendered as a soft chime. Approval, the cultural brief said. Approval and something else. Something that might have been admiration. "Then let us proceed with the formalities. The delegates will vote, but I can tell you now that their minds are already made up." She turned to walk back to her perch. Then she stopped. Her head turned and her eyes found Kala. "You have something to say, young one. I can see it in your posture." Kala's hand tightened on Idris's. Her face was pale, but her chin was set in a way that Idris recognized. The same stubborn set she had worn when she had asked about the alien children in the cold recycler bay, months and a lifetime ago. "Step forward." "Your parents," the senior ambassador said. "You carry them with you. I can see the shape of it beneath your clothing." Kala nodded. Her voice came out small at first, then stronger, as if the act of speaking fed a fire inside her. They were not soldiers, they were not important. My father was a maintenance technician, my mother was a botanist. They studied plants. They were not worth remembering. She stopped, her breath caught, then she continued. But they were real. They were kind. They held me when I was scared and they told me stories about the stars. They put me in the drop pod and they stayed behind so I could leave. They knew they were going to die and they put me in the pod anyway. She pulled the sealed pouch from around her neck. Her fingers worked the seal. She pulled out the photograph, a flat square of printed polymer, creased at the edges, showing a man and a woman standing in front of a hydroponic garden with their arms around each other. The man was laughing. The woman was squinting into the light. My parents, Calla said, their names were. She spoke their names. The translator in Idris's ear picked them up and rendered them as sound, phonemes that the Ari ears could parse. The senior ambassador watched the child. She watched the photograph. Her feathers went still. Then she bowed her head. It was a clear gesture, a deliberate one, a sign of respect across species, across languages, across the vast gulf of grief that should have made the act impossible. We will remember, she said. Calla cried. The sound was ragged and raw, and it broke something in Idris's chest that she had thought had long since turned to stone. She pulled Calla close and held her, and Torben came to stand on the other side, his big hands resting on the child's shoulders, the three of them holding each other in the green-gold light while the Ari ambassadors watched in silence. On the bridge of the silent scale, Threx Talek stood in a circle of armed guards. The review board had reached its verdict faster than expected. The council had been eager to be done with him. Malker had been eager to take his place. Dereliction of duty, failure to prosecute an extermination directive, unauthorized sympathy with a designated threat. The charges had been read aloud. He had not contested them. Malker stood at the edge of the circle, his copper scales bright with satisfaction, his three eyes fixed on Threx with the cold patience of someone who had won. The sentence is this, the review board's lead adjudicator said. Her voice was flat, stripped of ceremony. You are stripped of all rank and command. You have the choice, execution or permanent exile to the mining colony at Vareth. Threx did not hesitate. Exile. The adjudicator's feathers, no, his species did not have feathers, they had scales, he reminded himself, rippled with something that might have been disappointment or relief. So be it. The guards closed in. They took his command seals. They stripped his rank insignia from his chest. He let them do it without resistance. As they led him toward the transit corridor that would take him to the prisoner shuttle, Threx saw the monitor on the bridge's main display. A tactical overlay of the Ari homeworld. A tiny blip in high orbit, descending through the atmosphere. The human courier ship, the one he had let pass. He stopped, the guards tensed, but they did not force him forward, they waited. On the monitor, the tiny vessel disappeared into the green-blue cloud bands. Threx watched until there was nothing left to see. He did not know the name of the human female who had piloted that ship. He did not know the name of the old engineer or the child. He had never seen their faces clearly, never heard their voices outside the grainy recordings his listening nodes had captured. But he had seen the way she had worked, the way she had moved through the cold, repairing her dying station with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose. The way she had found his listening node and corrupted its data instead of destroying it, a message. A message that said, I know you are watching, I am not afraid. He had seen her, and he had chosen. Move, one of the guards said. Threx moved. Idris walked out of the council chamber and into the light of an alien sun. The sky was green at the horizon, shading to blue overhead. The clouds were thin and laced with gold. The air smelled like rain on living soil. Calla walked beside her. Her hand was warm. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clear. Torben walked on the other side. His steps were slow, his shoulders stooped, but he was walking, still standing, still here. Idris looked at the horizon, green and blue and full of life that was not hers. She thought about the story she had just told, the story she had carried in her bones for nearly a year, the story that was now recorded in Ari Council archives, preserved across species, witnessed by beings who had never seen a human face before today. She thought about the Vareth commander she had never met, the one who had sent those listening nodes, whose ships had orbited her station, whose fleet could have destroyed her 100 times. She did not know his name. She never would. She did not know if he had let them escape out of calculation or distraction or something else she had no word for. But it did not matter. They had escaped. They had arrived. And they had spoken. The story of humanity was not over. It had just been written down for the first time. Idris looked up at the alien sky. She felt Kala's hand in hers, warm and alive. She started walking. The path ahead was unknown. The future was uncertain. But the sun was bright and the air was good and they were not alone anymore. That was enough. That would have to be enough. For now,